Hi, Mike.
Hey, Bob. How you doing?
Good. Welcome, everybody, to Pop Culture SquadCast Live. We have an excellent guest tonight. We have comic editor and general good guy Mike Marts going to join us. We're going to talk about his experience in comics history. We're going to talk about what he's working on now, and which is a lot. So we are looking forward to that. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. And Mike's got a big launch tomorrow.
Yes. Well, we've talked about it already on, I think, on the show, and I've read it, and I'm super excited about it. We'll talk about it later, but yeah, Dick Tracy does come out tomorrow. That's what Mike's alluding to, and we are ready to go. And you have an admirer who's looking forward to seeing you this weekend, not me. She doesn't want to see me, but all right, let's
forward to sharing. What she's referring to there is Ithacon.
Exactly. That is the first thing we're going to talk about. Ithacon. Ithacon is this weekend. It is important to popculturesquad.com in that our esteemed colleague Ed Cato is intimately responsible for the existence of and continued success of Ithacon. This year's event is going to happen this weekend. As I mentioned, it is up in Ithaca, New York, in the middle of the Finger Lakes area, and the guests include Shelley Bond, who I cannot wait to see. I haven't seen in a long time. We have Dean Haspiel, and Shelley will be on a panel with you and I think she's on that panel. We're going to talk about what it means to be an editor with a whole bunch of former DC editors.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, I think it's you, Shelley, and Tom.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's good.
Dino's going to be there, our good buddy. Yay. And I will be hosting a panel on Saturday, I believe, with Dean. Walter is going to be there, which will always be fun. I think he's got a panel or two. We have Roger Stern going to be there again, and there's a bunch of publishers. Hoy is going to be there, and A Wave Blue World is going to be there, along with some artists, Bill Anderson and Philip Bond, and writer Frank Camuso. Tyler's the Wave Blue World. Chris Condon is going to be there. This is a really big show they have this year with a bunch of great creators. Really? This guy, that guy. And one of the interesting things, we have Tom, we have Joe Rybant is going to be there, Hart Seeley, Don Simpson will be back again. It's always great to see him. Emily is a great person to meet at Ithacon. Ken and Glenn, and it's just going to be fantastic. There is going to be a cosplay contest or a cosplay runway on Saturday and probably Sunday. There are events. There's things for kids to do. It's not a whole lot of money to get into the show. I think it's maybe $10 a day. I'm not sure how much the tickets are off the top of my head, but we're looking forward to it. As a matter of fact, I have some little Ithacon swag here. Let me change this out. Let me get this. Let's get rid of this for a second. That was given to me, and we have some Ithacon swag here. Oh, yeah. Little thing. Joe Rybant's gonna be there talking about Space Ghost. We have this nice little piece from Mr. Simpson.
I have been a fan of Megaton Man's for 40 years. Mm-hmm. All 40 of his years.
Ahoy is going to be talking about this new piece from Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows, Babs. And I got this special little from Mad Cave that sent up to there. Actually, this is not going to be. This is not part of Ithacon. This was sent to me specially because Ed bought it for me or picked it up for me. But we're going to be talking about Gatchaman tonight. I know that for sure. Let's turn a little bit to some current events. There's something you wanted to talk to me about when we mentioned this earlier. You and I in our pregame. Today's news in America, pretty much if you turned on any news, you saw some discussion related to a publisher uh, of information. We'll call it information. It's not necessarily accurate information, but it is something. It's some sort of
We used to call those things scandal sheets.
scandal sheets. Yes. So,
Yeah, they're not, but now all of a sudden, this week,
lies.
they are once again.
All right, so let's talk about what it is you wanted to mention.
Okay, the first witness called by the prosecution was a friend and collaborator of the defendants, a guy by the name of David Pecker.
Right.
Now, of course, the late night comics have been having a field day with his name.
Yes.
And also with his habits. But what is not well known, and I wish to thank our friend Charlie Meyerson for reminding me of this. He mentioned it about 2 years ago. He reminded me. David Pecker was working for Fawcett back in.
Really?
He was a lawyer there.
When did Fawcett stop existing?
Oh, Fawcett, well, it's part of CBS.
Okay.
And CBS is in the process of being sold, so who knows? I mean, it's the media business. Nobody knows who owns anything anymore.
Right.
But Pecker was the guy who was our go-to, and by our I mean DC, and in specific Paul Levitz.
Now, is this? Are we talking 70s or are we talking late 80s?
Yeah.
So late 70s.
Ooh, late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
Okay.
What was going on was we were doing, I guess it was the 80s. We were doing all of these Captain Marvel things. You know, the Shazam Captain Marvel, the real one.
Yeah.
Not that I have anything against the several hundred Captains Marvel that followed him. But DC had the publishing rights. They kind of won it in the lawsuit back in the 50s when they sued Fawcett for ripping off Superman.
Right.
Fawcett delayed the trial for about 10 years and then kind of threw in the towel because the comics weren't selling the way they had been before. I doubt that they were selling more than maybe 2 million different Captain Marvel comic books every month.
Right.
Maybe 3 million. It's just, but it wasn't good enough for them, and I get that.
Sure.
So DC had to pay Fawcett every time we used one of those characters, which we did fairly frequently, because most people weren't aware that we had to pay for the use. Some folks just thought, DC owned them. They didn't. They controlled them. They didn't own them.
Okay.
So at one point in time, it just made more sense to go to Fawcett and buy it from them. Buy them out.
Mm-hmm.
At first, they weren't certain they owned it. That was a whole different thing. But the guy who represented Fawcett, the gentleman who was their negotiator, was David Pecker. And he went on to become the publisher of the National Enquirer, the aforementioned scandal sheet, and was involved in the Trump scandals, in that he paid a lot of money to squash stories in the Enquirer on behalf of Trump. They would buy exclusive rights to a story and then never publish it. Which may or may not be illegal, but it does indicate a certain attitude on the defendant's part. That's why they led with him as their first witness.
Sure. I mean, well, since we've tied it to comics, right? It is definitely it's definitely something that's at top of mind for a lot of people right now. And let's hope that the truth shall set us free.
Okay, the last thing I said right before we went on the air tonight was the problem with the left is that they think that the truth will set us free, and it never does.
Right.
It never does, and it certainly hasn't in the Trump case. So let us hope the truth will finally sink in for that 45% of the American population who think that Trump should not be should not be convicted of anything. He should be president. He should be king. He should live forever. These are all things I'm opposed to.
I agree with you on those things. Let's put that behind us. Let's move on to more interesting things.
Oh no! I shot my wad with Trump. Jeez.
Well, I will say I want to bring this back. So we'll go a little bit outside. I saw an article today, and it was picking up on your topic that we talked about a few weeks ago. Your column related to AI and legalities.
Mm-hmm.
There are states that are now looking towards being explicitly specific about making deep fake porn illegal using AI.
I think any use of real people without their permission is actionable or should be actionable. So that also includes deep fake porn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly sure how you're going to stop it, particularly since your friends over at Apple are going to need a lot of porn to sell those $3,000 Apple Vision glasses.
Yeah. Well, they it's becoming it's almost it's very odd. Like from my experience, my everyday experience today, I cannot get away from the two letters AI in every thing that I do on my phone or on my computer or in anything. It doesn't matter where I go. They're like, "Oh, you want some AI? How about some more AI? Would you like some AI over here? Would you like some AI with that?"
Yep. Yep. The first hit's free. I know. I actually feel sorry for artists whose first name is Al.
Yes.
You know?
Sure.
I feel sorry for them because it's going to say Al whatever, and people are going to think, oh, this can't be a real artist,
right?
In the Charlton days when Giordano was there, they had machine lettering on most of their.
I hate it a lot.
I'm sorry.
I hate it a lot.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. But Charlton was not known for its vast expenditures.
Sure.
And when they gave credit to the letterer, this occasionally they did have a real letterer. Jim Aparo would letter his own stuff. The credit was given to a machine. So if it says art : artificial intelligence, I don't know.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, we know artists, and I suspect many people watching this can think of artists whose entire careers essentially were tracing other people's work. And it goes back to the beginning of the medium.
Absolutely.
And this is arguably a faster and somewhat more innovative way of doing that. The swiping art is nothing new. We just have a more expensive and arguably niftier way to swipe art.
Mm-hmm.
And people with no artistic skill whatsoever, for example, the majority of people who are editing comic books, can become masters of the craft just by lifting other people's work.
Sure.
But we could have done that just with a light box.
Some people have done it just with a light box.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I won't mention the artist who was doing all the swiping. But in the early days of First Comics, we got these books, these comics, new comics, and it was from a publisher who had just gone back into the superhero field. And Joe Staton is looking through it, and he says, "Oh my God!" And he stops, and Joe is not given to loud expression.
No, he's not.
So everything stopped. I mean,
right,
the cockroaches stopped.
If Joe's audible, then everybody's got to pay attention to it.
That's right. That's exactly right. And Joe just said, and he looked bewildered. And he said, "I don't think I've ever been swiped before." So we had a little party for him,
Well, good. He should be.
But I won't mention the artists.
That's fine.
He's not alive anymore.
Okay.
No, Joe is, not the swipe art.
Joe better be. All right. Couple quick hits before we get to our guest. Have you seen the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer yet?
Oh my God, yes.
Are you excited?
I was excited before.
I was excited before.
I was thrilled because at heart I'm a child.
Sure.
Not according to my driver's license, but at heart I'm a child. And I had never heard so many fucks in a Disney trailer, let alone movie. And
Sure.
I think there were more fucks in the Disney Deadpool trailer than in the first two Deadpool movies combined.
There may have been.
There may have been. I mean, for a moment there, I thought, is this the Doom Patrol? I'm watching the Doom Patrol, right? It was very exciting. I love the damn thing.
It's like 10 words, got to be a fuck, like that kind of thing. Like can't get every 10 words must be at least one in there.
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing is the Liefeld's Just Feet. Did you see that?
Yes. I also noticed the store next to the Liefeld store, which got blowed up.
Yeah.
And you can go online and see it. I mean, it's a trailer. It was like a health, one of those like emergency storefront doctor things. And it was the smallest place I'd ever seen in my life. It's like if they had a patient, they couldn't have a doctor in the same room.
Right.
It was too small. So I thought that was kind of weird.
I'm very excited for it. I feel like I've tried to keep up with most of the Marvel stuff at my own leisure, and I feel like I need to watch Loki season 2 for this movie.
I think you should.
Not that I don't want to. Right? Exactly.
And not just for this movie, because what happened in Loki season 2, which I loved, affects the movies and television shows dramatically.
Right. So we will give that warning to our listeners and watchers that you probably should pick that up. Not again because it's good, because it's worth watching. Number one, and number two, because I think it will make this movie a little cleaner for the.
I think so. We won't know until we see it.
Right, but I now have something to look forward to for July.
Right. I will watch trailers, but I no longer have that need to find out everything about a movie I haven't seen.
I'm good. I don't need any more trailers.
That's right. That's it. Let me see the movie now. You got my money, or at least you're going to have my money. I will actually venture out of the house for something other than a comic book convention or an Italian beef sandwich, and I will put my money down.
You're getting one of those.
Money down for my daughter's ticket, and she doesn't get the senior citizen discount.
You're getting one of those this weekend. Unfortunately, not both.
Yes, I know, and I think I texted you.
You did. I know you're excited.
My favorite Italian beef sandwich in Chicago, which is redundant. They just came out with like a 9-inch version. You can make.
We're talking about the Trump David Pecker story again.
Yeah, it has something to do with Captain Marvel or Spice Smasher. I'm not sure which.
Right. We're not talking about 9-inch versions of that. So have you? I know this. I probably know the answer to this, but I want to have this on there. Are you hearing me?
I hear you better without this, and I can fix this. But
okay, good.
Screw that. I can hear you fine.
Have you watched X-Men 97, the animated?
I watched the first one. As it turns out, I didn't watch the original series.
Well, I didn't watch all of it either.
Yeah.
And this, I have to say, I love it. I don't know why. I know that, and I've told this to people, it is, it's something that is that the creators of this series were very careful of being respectful of the source material, honoring it and emulating it. Right. But it is very, it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon, but it's very much not a Saturday morning cartoon. But it feels that way. So if you're looking for what you had, and I had this with certain things that are nostalgia based, like I know why I like it, because it gives me the feeling of those cartoons when I was in my 20s, and it gives me there's so many Easter eggs of X-Men stories that I grew up like, because it's taking 70s and 80s X-Men stories and putting that in, and I love that. I hope other people like it, but I don't know that they would, because they're not getting those same, like, the storytelling is good, sure, but there's so many things that have good storytelling.
Well, in streaming, it's particularly these days, getting a second season is very hard. Getting a third season is almost impossible. And the shows that seem to be getting those pickups right now are the animated shows, and they're very good. I love Harley Quinn. Yes, it's X-rated.
Yes,
it's X-rated.
A lot of fun.
Absolutely. But I think it's hilarious and very, very well done. I like the Star Trek Lower Decks show. I think that's terrific. And actually as good a Star Trek series as I've ever seen. Particularly when they did the crossover into the real world. So
that was great. That was fantastic.
That was fantastic. So I'm excited about that, because somebody out there in streaming land realized that they can push the boundaries in animated heroic fantasy.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that. I mean, they're trying out new stuff you'd never be able to try out on a network television show.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I recommend you watch it. I think the stories are good. There's very few parts where I'm like, oh, I get a little cringy with X-Men 97, but in general, it's interesting. It's made me ask myself questions about, like, the way the comic stories evolved. Like, and now I'm not going to be able to ask those questions, because I was going to ask Louise a bunch of questions this weekend at the con. But she's not going to be there.
Sure, just call her up.
I will. I'll grab her. Like, I always get in trouble because I've met many comic book writers, artists, creators, editors that I've become friends of mine, and I hope to consider her a friend. But I melt and fanboy out with Louise more than anybody else for some weird reason.
I have seen that with many people.
Adrian being one.
Adrian being one. Adrian is the owner of Pop Culture Squad. She has a job title, which is HBIC, and I introduced her to Wheezy once at a convention many years ago because I knew how much she literally worshipped Louise Simonson, which is perfectly valid.
Sure.
Perfectly valid. She's a wonderful human being and a phenomenal writer and editor. My God. And just aces. And I snuck her up on it. I had Adrian turn around and I immediately introduced the two of them. And Adrian just almost fainted. Now, I had done the same thing with Dave Gibbons and her mother.
Well,
so I feel like, continuity here. I get to mind fuck these women I'm related to.
Dave's great. Dave impressed the hell out of Shari by remembering her name.
There you go.
All right.
Well, Shari impresses the hell out of me. So but she knows my name.
All right. We are going to get to our guests. I have some couple other things. We'll hold off to them for next week that we'll come back to. But I want to bring in our guest, Mike Marts, who is our guest this week, has been in making comics for 30 years now, and has touched some amazing comics and is responsible in no small part for quite a few important comics that have come through, and has been in the last decade very responsible for making some really groundbreaking independent comics and to continue to do that I'm looking forward to. But I'm going to shut up and we're going to take a little.
Let me add one before we do the intro. Over the last 30 years since Mike's been in the field, the role of the editor, particularly at the bigger publishers, has been diminished. It's somewhat less creative because you don't have the decision-making power that I grabbed when I was at DC or I had when I was at First Comics, that sort of thing. For Mr. Marts to stand out the way he does within that world of sort of diminished authority, to make your mark under those circumstances, that's a hell of an achievement.
Yep, I agree. Let's bring in Mike. Welcome.
Hey, Bob. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Great to see you.
Fun. Good to see you too. That slideshow blew me away. I saw covers up there I haven't thought about in years.
Well, listen, there's a lot of them. That's a very small amount. It was difficult. I do want to say that the Black Wolf.
I forgot that book even existed.
Well, we're going to see Bill Anderson this weekend. So I'm going to remind him of it because he inked it.
That's crazy. That the Black Wolf, that that was like 22 years old, and as an assistant editor at Marvel, I was making no money. So I would supplement my income by writing letters pages and also by doing rush coloring jobs. Now,
Yes.
I am in no way a great colorist, but back then, if someone said, "Can you color a book overnight?" I was like, "Sure, I'll do it." That means I can make my rent this month.
Right.
And Matt Idelson, who I think was the assistant editor on Black Wolf, he was like, "I did this colored overnight," and I guess I did it.
You got a credit.
Right. Right.
The cover that Bob flashed on the screen that stopped me was that Supergirl Legion cover.
That was like your second
first came out
issue.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I think that was like his second issue of editing that book.
Yeah, Bob, you're right. Yeah. When I first got into DC, which was around 2006, Dan DiDio had wanted me to move into the Batman group editor spot, but Pete Tomasi was still on staff and he was the Batman editor, and he knew he was leaving. He knew he was going to go freelance writing and everything. So I had a few months of like kind of not treading water, but just working on other things until the Batman spot opened up. And Legion of Superheroes was one of those books. And that was with Mark Waid and Barry Kitson, I think, if memory serves.
It was.
Yeah.
What were you going to say about it, Mike? This Mike.
It's a start. It's a startling.
This Mike.
That's right. It's a startling cover. And I've been reading comics since forever, since Papyrus, and to see a cover that makes you go, "Whoa, wait a moment!" Particularly when a million of them are flashing by, to me, that's a good cover. My favorite covers are, and I think because I still see them as sales tools, and they are, even if a lot of people don't think that, they're wrong. But that is a sales tool. It stopped me. It grabbed my eye. It made me, and I'd seen it before a long time ago. It was like, oh, wow, cool.
Right. I picked it. Great. I actually picked that one specifically because the first one was just wasn't a great cover. The first one, the first Supergirl that you worked on wasn't as
I was trying to
shocking
think
as that one.
It was, but right. That was a very good cover.
The first one kind of reminds me of the Legion cover from volume 3 of Legion of Superheroes when they went back for Superboy, like that sun colored background thing. Right. But so you were in 94 an assistant editor at Marvel. How did your career start at Marvel? And like you've moved around, but every place you've been, you've left a mark. But what made you do this?
Yeah, Marvel was the first place I started like earning an actual paycheck.
Sure.
In college, I worked in retail, a store called Star Spangled Comics in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like was a lot of us,
was it the College of New Jersey when you were there, or was it still Trenton State?
Oh, that's it. So you did your homework, Bob. So it was actually Trenton State when I was a freshman. And then I think it was my junior year, it switched to College of New Jersey. So I was there when it made the switch. And
right. Yeah, I was at Rutgers when it made the switch.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Well, I spent most of my weekend nights at Rutgers because
sure, why not?
Trenton State didn't have many bars. So I was working in retail in Greenbrook, New Jersey, mm-hmm. and I wanted to be the next Chris Claremont. Yeah, that was my goal, was to be the writer of the X-Men. And at Trenton State, I was studying journalism, so I was on like the editing and writing track. And somewhere along the line, I was like, maybe I can kind of combine what I'm studying with what I want to actually do with my life. And I was focused on writing. I would write up a story synopsis from Marvel. I would write up a new one each week. So one week was Silver Surfer, and next week was Defenders, and next week was Hulk, and I'd mail them in. And occasionally I would get back this polite rejection letter, like, we're fine, thanks for the submission, but we're okay. But eventually I became friends with Mark McKenna, who was a professional anchor at both Marvel and DC, and he was a customer at the comic shop that I worked at. And after getting chummy with him, he was like, listen, I go up to the offices at Marvel once a month. When I bring in pages next time, I can bring some of your stories and actually hand deliver them to editors. And this was like, it blew my mind. I was like,
Sure.
Just cutting out the whole mail process, and he would hand deliver stories. And he did this a few times, and I actually got like real feedback from real people. So Ralph Macchio read something of mine. Fabian Nicieza read something of mine, and I got like actual feedback. And again, I was blown away. But what happened there was I was so focused on being a comic writer, and then I was understanding, okay, the editor, like, they must do more than just like proofread comics.
Right.
And I was getting this interaction with Fabian and Ralph, and I understood, like, okay, these guys are behind the scenes, but they're making decisions. They're hiring the writers, they're coaching the writers, they're hiring the artists. And that suddenly became what I wanted to do. And I learned about the internship program that they had up there at the time. And I think it was between my junior and senior year of college that I went and I was an intern at Marvel Comics. And I started in the West Coast Avengers office, is what they were calling it back then. So it was West Coast Avengers, Iron Man, War Machine.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few limited series like Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye. So I got to work in that office with Nel Yomtov, who had been a long time Marvel staffer. And I just kind of like he became my mentor. He took me under his wing, and eventually an internship spot evolved into an actual assistant editor spot. And I had to take it. But what's funny is he made me the offer when I was still a senior in college. And I was like, dream job, finish college. Like, which one do I take? And it was such a tough decision, but I was like, I may never get another chance like this at Marvel. So I promised Nell, I was like, I will finish college. I'll take night classes. I'll go on the weekend. And he actually had to go down to Tom DeFalco's office, the editor-in-chief at the time, and convince Tom that I was somehow worth it, that this, young scrub from New Jersey was like worth it. And Tom, he was like, that kid better fucking finish college. And Nell was like, no, he will. And so, I
that is Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Tom.
It really is. It really is. That's great. You actually reveal a secret. You just revealed a secret. People are always asking, I'm sure you get it, Bob gets it, I get it, from people primarily at conventions saying, how do I break into comics? And we usually have a couple of standard responses and a couple of really clever, snotty responses because, we're children. But you did it in one of in probably the easiest way. You worked at a comic book store that was in a location where other comic book people, professionals, go. That used to be just, the New York area, New Jersey, Connecticut. Now, of course, it's San Diego and Los Angeles and certainly Portland. Working at a comic book store is a good way to get into it and to meet the people you need to meet. I say this because the woman we were just talking about, the HBIC, the Pop Culture Squad.
Oh yeah.
She's my daughter, but is actually stepdaughter, and I met her when she was 15 because she was hired by my local comic book store to work there because Amanda Connor just left to draw comic books for a living.
Yeah.
But she made it into the business that way. And Adrian got into the business that way because, you know, her mom married this guy, you know, and that's cool.
Right.
That's great. She's my assistant editor for many years and did a great job. So I firmly believe in that process, and also it's a learning experience because you get to know what the fans feel about the work, whether you agree with it or not, whether you've read the book that they're talking about or not. It doesn't really matter. You're getting your training. You're learning your audience. And that's, I don't know any better way of doing that.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. I mean, even if you go into working at a comic shop as just a Marvel zombie, which mostly that's what I was, I'm suddenly exposed to all of the other publishers. And the guy who's working with me at the store, he's like, "You got to read this issue of Teen Titans." So suddenly, I'm a Teen Titans fan, and then I'm a Batman fan, and then I'm picking up these other things. And then he's like, "You should check out Valiant." And I'm like, "I'll check out Valiant." So you get to know everything in the industry. You get exposed to so many different writers and artists. You start becoming aware of what's hot, what's not, what's working, what's selling, and those are all tools that in my 2 or 3 years in comic retail that I took with me when I eventually became an editor. Just
Right.
being able to recognize trends, being able to recognize why this person over here suddenly caught fire, or why this person over here is kind of their flame is diminishing. So it's it's a good crash course, I think, for any type of job within the industry.
Absolutely. And there's an additional benefit, and that is that by working in the store, after a while, you begin, and talking to folks who are in the business, you begin to feel part of the larger community, which I tend to refer to as the donut shop. But
That's right.
that's
right.
what it is, folks. It's an old-timey donut shop where people who've hated each other for 30 years still refer to each other by their first name.
Yeah, that's right.
So being part of that community, feeling like you're part of that community, helps prepare you mentally and psychologically to be in that field of endeavor, to risk. And being a freelancer is always a risk. Being an editor is a risk added with scapegoat, which is nice. You feel like you're not alone. They're not picking on you,
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
You're right. Go ahead, Bob.
No, you go ahead, please.
I was just saying, the community aspect is something big, especially when you're first starting out, and then you kind of get exposed to the idea that there's this larger community. When I was working at that shop, I remember Mark McKenna, who was my conduit to the professional world. He was like, "I'm going to invite you over to my Christmas party this year, and there's going to be other comic book professionals there." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "I don't want you to freak out, but Adam Kubert's going to be there." I was like, "I won't freak out. All right, I won't geek out." And just being at that party with other professionals, and suddenly they're treating you like one of us, and they're talking to you and asking questions, and you suddenly realize okay, I'm becoming a part of this.
Mike did that to me last year when we went to Chicago. He's like, you're gonna come to lunch. I'm like, okay, we're gonna go to lunch. We're gonna probably get some Italian beef. Okay, there's gonna be people there. Alex Ross is gonna be there. Don't freak out. Okay.
Actually, it was a hell of a good crowd.
It was a great crowd. I do want to say that I did wear a shirt that looked a lot like this.
Oh, very good.
That's really the fun of the business, and we never want to lose touch with the fun, because that's what got us into comics in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not serving up that fun, I don't want to say to the next generation, because it is, but it's also the generation before and after that, you're not serving them right. They're there to have fun.
Right. I tell people that a lot, maybe like younger creators or even younger editors, that with very few exceptions, most of us within this industry are not going to come out of it millionaires. You know,
Very few.
hopefully we'll be able to make a living, a comfortable one and a happy one. But most of us are here because we enjoy the job, and we should be able to wake up every morning and say, I'm happy to be doing this.
Yeah. I could have taken at any point in my career, and I've done a lot of different things, but I've done it all simultaneously. I could have taken better paying jobs. Luckily, I was never in it for the money, which many people regard as a fault of mine. But I'm not. I'm in it to produce stuff, to create whatever it is. My political work is creative work. And you always have to hold on to that because that's what our readers expect. They expect that fun thing. Even if they take it way too seriously, so do we.
I want to ask you a question about how you handle this. So as you, some of the things in that video that we had, some of the covers and events that they're events, they are important parts of comics history that you shepherded in certain ways. when you know that is there something that that something's going to be big? Do you know ahead of time? You're like, oh, this is going to be big. Like Batman's going to die, or we're going to change. We're going to bring Josh Whedon to do X-Men. Like how do you approach those type of events? Do you think about it in terms of what the effect is going to be historically? Are you just focused on trying to make the good comic? Like how do you approach bigger things like that?
That's a good question. With any big project like that, most times they're going to be just something that's on the publishing schedule. Maybe it's just filling a need, having a talk with your boss, the editor-in-chief or whoever, and they say, we need a big Batman event for next summer, or we need to bring someone big onto Uncanny X-Men. So it starts off like that, and maybe just like, we need to do something big,
right,
to get more eyes, to get more readers, to sell more books. And then something starts to take shape. And at some point in the process, usually before it's announced, you might realize, okay, this is going to be something even bigger than we thought. The Joss Whedon on Astonishing X-Men is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
It's well documented that was a real serendipitous moment for Joe Quesada. We had just lost Grant Morrison off of New X-Men, and at a convention, Joe bumped into Joss. They knew each other, and it worked out. Like Joss was going to come on to X-Men, and I'm not sure. We probably didn't even decide it was going to be a new book at that point in time. It was probably he was just going to come in and do New X-Men. But then you start working with Joss, and it's at first you're like, oh, well, I revere this guy's work, the Vampire Slayer, everything, Firefly. But then you get that first script in, and now over the years, I've read thousands of scripts, and most of them need some type of note.
Right.
But there's only a small handful of writers where when I get a script, something would be like pristine. And Joss's scripts were just phenomenally perfect, which is good, because if there were notes, I don't know how I might approach that with Joss. Like, hey,
sure,
you got to fix your work. But they were perfect, pristine. And at that point, you realize, okay, this is going to be something phenomenal. Sure. Those first few pages of John Cassaday's come in, and you realize,
right?
Oh, like, because sometimes you're rolling the dice. You don't know with the writer and the artist if they are going to be the right match, or they're going to work well together, or if they're going to mesh. But you get something like Joss and John, who are just like meant to be.
I don't really want to do all this. We could spend hours asking you all these questions, but like, was that something that you decided?
if memory serves,
Was John the person you're like, I want to ask John?
if memory serves, John was a request from Joss.
Really?
The two of them knew each other.
Okay.
They were friendly, and John Cassidy was already like, a big part of the Marvel family. We'd see him at parties. He'd be coming to the office, and I knew John too. So it was just one of those no brainers. Like
Sure.
when Joss said, "Hey, can we get John Cassidy?" We were like, "Yes, yeah, of course. Let's do it." But in those moments, you might know it's special, but you certainly don't. You don't view it as, oh, this might be a historical book or something that kind of changed the shape of things. That's that kind of thing. I think happens a few years after the fact. Like something like Scott Snyder's Batman run. When we first started, we are just like, Scott's this great new writer. And he's writing the shit out of Batman. But
when I first met Scott, I told him he was doing Batman at the time, and I told him how much I enjoyed it, and he was shocked. I don't think he'd be shocked today to hear people enjoy his work.
Well,
maybe.
I want to throw that question back to this Mike. So, and this for the other Mike, when you were working with the third Mike on Longbow Hunters, right? Did you think, first of all, Mike Marts, Longbow Hunters changed the game, right? Changed the game. It is one of my favorite things. It is, comics are different because Longbow Hunters exists. Did you, when you guys were working on that, did you think, hey, this might be something important?
Wow. I never allow myself that thought.
Okay.
It's all the story and making it as good as possible. And if it becomes important out of that, that's great. And sometimes it does. American Flag, and there are a few projects I was lucky enough to work on that were game changers. And that's great. I'm extraordinarily proud of it. But what you're really doing is unleashing that madman inside of a very creative writer-artist.
Mm-hmm.
You're cutting the ropes, and you're making them feel comfortable. You mentioned notes, Mike, giving somebody like Joss notes. I had to give notes to Will Eisner and to Peter O'Donnell, and I was scared shitless. And I've been into business billion years by the time I did either of those.
Right.
And if I work with people like that today, and I hope to, I would have that same feeling. I better. If I'm not in awe of your work, I'm missing something here, because that's what we bring to the table.
Right. Well, from the outside looking in, when Longbow Hunters came out, I was a teenager. I was probably in high school. And to me and my friends, I mean, me and my friend, I only had one other friend that read comics.
Sure. We all did.
We knew that was something different, and it was something special. It was always a top of the pile read for us.
Right. That's nice to hear. That's nice to hear. That was a changer for a number of reasons. The production values, Grell was making up some of that stuff as he was going along, and really, we were able to work it out through production to get some of that magnificent pencil work inside all that beautiful color work. Oh my God. So, we were taking advantage of the new stuff, the newest stuff, including the format, because that format had only been used once before, and that was with The Dark Knight, or The Dark Knight Returns, actually. And, to be the next one right after that, it's like, what do you do after Sergeant Pepper's. I mean, so that was a high wire act too.
It was, well, you know how I feel about it. I want to change a little bit. Like, so when you left DC, when they moved, right? You didn't go west. Is that?
That's right. Yeah, that's why I decided. That's why I ended up leaving DC, is because I
Sure.
couldn't
You're not the only
couldn't
one.
make the move to California. Yeah.
Right.
And I had that.
Yeah, that was
my contract.
What's that?
That if you decide, and this is obviously well before you were there, but if they decided to move to the coast, Warner Brothers, I was not obligated to continue to work under that contract. And the guy who suggested that to me was Paul Levitt. So, I knew I was on firm ground. Not that I don't like the West Coast. I just didn't want to live there.
right.
But okay, so my recollection is you went back to Marvel for a bit, but then you went to Aftershock. And at Aftershock, you made so many amazing comics that I can't even begin to like. I cherry picked a few to put in that thing. Like they are the talent that you put together there, the creative teams that you put together, the stories that were being generated. How different and was that for you after working in the superhero world for so long?
It was different. It required some changing of gears internally, because for 20 plus years, it was nothing but superheroes. It was
right.
Capes and tights. And that's the language I spoke, the language I knew. And everything was work for hire. Everything was owned by the companies. So moving into the creator-owned space, it was different in that you were approaching the relationship with the creators a little differently, because instead of it being the company's baby that they're playing with, it's the creator's baby that we have the privilege of publishing. Mm-hmm. So that changes the dynamic a little bit. And, also just due to the nature of the industry and how you can put things out these days. And like, if you start a creator-owned company, you can't just say like, all right, this series is going to be 30 issues long. Unless you're Robert Kirkman or Brian Vaughan, you don't have that luxury. So you've got to try things 5 issues at a time or 6 issues at a time. So that's another shift in the way of thinking of publishing, of editing, that we had to get used to. Fortunately, you get used to it really quick. When you're trying to put out as many books as you are, and we would grow incrementally gradually each year. The level of output rose, and you get used to the way of doing it. And it was amazing too, because at Marvel or DC, you get in with a certain group of writers and artists, and if you're lucky, you keep working with them. Mm-hmm. Marvel and DC, I worked with Andy Kubert for so long, or Tony Daniel, or Scott Snyder, or Grant Morrison. But at a creator-owned company, when you're constantly cycling in and cycling out of people's new ideas, you're getting to work with many more people on any given day. So that's like a gift.
Sure.
It wasn't something I thought about when I was first going in.
For me, there was an interesting curve. When I'm editing at DC, my job really is to protect the company's asset. Now, of course, because I'm a somewhat confrontational, anti-bureaucratic guy, I would represent the talent to the company and the company to the talent. I saw it as a two-way street. So maybe that gave me a leg up. But when you're working with a creator who created and owns the property, it's a little different. It's a lot different in some respects. It depends on the creator, but most of the bigger names that I've worked with, I've done both. I've worked with them at majors, I've worked with them on independent projects, and the relationship is different. I don't have a preference for one or the other. It's the end result that counts.
You're absolutely right, Mike. Yeah. At the beginning of the day, you're still sitting down and you're saying, I want to make good comics. If it's the company's
Right.
thing or if it's the creator's thing. So the way I went about my job never really changed.
Right.
It was more just the things I was working on.
I thought that's cool. Was there anything that you can say? Was there one project that sticks out, or any more at when you're at Aftershock, like that you like fell out of your chair, like I have to make this. This is the thing.
Yeah, there's a few, but I mean the thing that really stands out to me is maybe in our second year of publishing, we were going to some shows. I think we went to Emerald City and we went to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a writer that would come by the table, and he was already in the industry, but he was looking to make a bigger mark. And it was Donnie Cates.
Mm-hmm.
And he had recently sold a book to Skybound, and he also sold another one to Wizard. So, he was getting noticed, and he certainly wasn't the star that he eventually became, but, the signs were there. And he was pitching us a few different ideas, and there were good things about each of them. But for whatever reason, we hadn't accepted any of them. Maybe because we had something that already kind of looked and tasted like it, or
right.
Maybe it just didn't,
And that happens more than people think.
Oh yeah, it happens a lot. But Donnie was great, professional. He was like, "Hey, I'm just going to keep trying." And it was at New York one year where he came by and he said, "I've got the book for you." And we're like, "Okay, cool." And he started telling us what would become Baby Teeth. And we immediately just everything around us in the convention just stopped, and we were just focused on what Donnie was telling us about this project. And we were hooked. And it was one of those things where when we went back to the office the next week, drew up a contract. It was approved. And even still, you're always taking a risk. You don't know if the idea is going to translate well to the finished page. But when he delivered the first script and I sat down and read it, I was like, we have something beautiful on our hands. That moment really sticks out to me. I knew that, there's so many good writers I've worked with. Some of them are really talented. A few others are gifted. And when I was reading that script, I was, this is a gifted individual.
Sure. Absolutely true. When you approach and certain companies do things differently. I've talked to some of the people who worked with you when you were in Aftershock. Sometimes you guys a writer will present a thing, and then you will put the team together or help put the team together for them. Sometimes people will come to you with the team intact. How do you think that works? Do you think that's important as an editor to have say in how things work? Is it better for you does it make it easier for you to accept something knowing that you can guide it a little differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always felt that doing that in the process helped us at Aftershock. A lot of it had to do with Joe Pruitt and my combined Rolodexes, the fact that we had worked with so many great artists over the years. And we also didn't want to feel the writers needed to be pressured into having an attached artist on their project, because a lot of times what happens there is that a writer might attach an artist to their project, and in the course of the 5 or 6 months that they're shopping the project around, that artist may have gone on and started on something else at a different company.
Right.
So certainly, sometimes writers would come to us and they had an artist and there was a great artist and we're like, hey, that makes our jobs easier. But we never pressured the artist or pressured the writers to have to come with a partner. And we would say, you come here, we will find someone great for you. And we'd always, cast our net out and then maybe bring back 5 or 6 names that we would show to the writer. And, they'd say, let's try this person first and that person second. And that's how our process worked there. And it seemed to work for us. I try to do a bit of the same thing at Mad Cave for our creator-owned books.
Okay.
Never really trying to make it a rule that someone has to come with an artist attached.
How do you find that works though? How do you find that you're experiencing it? Like, is it that you find people coming with a artist attached or more?
Sometimes, sometimes they do. And what's I'm trying to figure out how to put this delicately.
Sure.
Maybe not everyone.
Well, let me put it to you in this way. Sometimes you might have a really good idea, and as an editor, you might find that idea doesn't work with the artist that is attached to it.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
That's got to be very difficult to handle.
It is, because sometimes you get in a good idea, but you look at it and you say, all right, well, the artist you picked may not be commercial enough to sell copies. It may actually turn people away. Those are difficult conversations to have, but it's part of the business.
Sure.
And
it's one of those things about being an editor that a lot of people don't acknowledge that as an editor, you're always having the most difficult conversations.
Oh, yeah.
You're the one who has to say, listen, I love this, but, whatever the but is, maybe, you may want to make sure that if you're doing a double page spread, you cross the fold on the top tier so that people don't start reading wrong.
Right.
Which I hate.
Right. Casting is probably the most important part of the job. If you miscast, you're only going to have a crappy comic book and a lousy time producing it. If you cast it correctly, hey, life is beautiful. Most creator-owned projects I've worked with come with a team. Maybe not everybody, but certainly writer-artist. And in many cases, because of Jules Pfeiffer, I have a tendency to prefer writer-artists. Pfeiffer, in his book, The Great Comic Book Heroes, was talking about the 1940s and all of the original comic book publishers. And he talked about the wind down of that period at the end after the war. And he said, very few artists would ink their own work. Very few writers would draw their own work anymore. They just didn't care. They needed to make a living. This is what they did for a living. Nobody knew what was going to sell. They would take what was given them. And Pfeiffer sounded, and I worked with him a couple years after that, actually, very remorseful of that. He said, that was a period that ended, that changed. And I will have to admit that influenced me greatly, that most of the writer-artists that I've worked with, I think, are better as writer-artists, doing their own thing. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have assistants, or you don't bring in a colorist or a letterer or something like that. And of course, eventually you have to make a deadline. The more one person is doing, the harder it is to make that deadline.
Yeah, very true.
So you got to be on your toes. Um, Either you think that that's like kind of the fun part of the job, or you probably should be looking for a different job, because that's the
right.
job.
It is
It's
the job.
interesting because I think there's been a change to that. I think things have. I think there are more writer artists today than when I was a kid. Not necessarily being published, but there are more people making their own stuff that are out there writing and drawing their own stuff. I think
Because there are more publishers that
right.
Mike has been working with that allow for that. I mean, the game changer when we created First Comics was not the books that we created. I mean, obviously that's a good part of it. It was the fact that we were not DC or Marvel or Archie or Harvey. Not being DC or Marvel gave the talents a lot more room. Right. Sometimes you'd have to sort of guide them through that. So, no, you can do this. You can do this now. And their eyes light up and they go, wow, that's kind of cool. It's like telling somebody like, oh, you've got a gun. Why don't you go rob this bank? but
there are better analogies, Michael.
No, there aren't. That was right
Well,
on.
it's funny, like in certain spaces, the writer artist is almost like assumed. Like, I mean, at Mad Cave, we have a few different imprints, and Paper Cuts is our imprint, which is geared towards the middle grade space, and that space, it's more the norm to be a writer artist,
right?
So it's funny because some editors that I'm working with, they're used to just that, and then when we talk about things that are like more in the creator-owned space or the Team Plus space, they're a little surprised sometimes when there's separate writer, separate artist, as opposed to them being the same person.
One of the reasons for that, I think, is that a writer and an artist work in their world. They don't see anybody else, and if they're on deadline, they don't even see their relatives. So you don't get to share that stuff. But whatever it is that's going on inside your head, you have a chance of putting that down on paper. And that's an opportunity most humans don't get.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I want to shift gears a little bit and let's talk about your current employer and one of my favorite publishers in Mad Cave. I have, for the past few years, been very excited about what you guys are doing. Pretty much when they hired you was a big change from my perspective. I'm like, okay, they're serious. They've brought on a mind that knows the industry. They are, and from the moment you got there, you've been putting out amazing things. What has been your experience, working there? And I talked to Mark Irwin last month in Kansas City, and he talked a bit about the history of Mad Cave, but like from your experience coming in, what surprised you about the company and the direction you guys are moving? And we'll talk about the stuff coming out, but yeah.
Yeah, the thing that really put Mad Cave on the map for me, Mad Cave was a friendly competitor when I was at Aftershock. We were kind of always, in the same grouping, and people would talk about those companies in the same sentence, along with some others like Vault and Scout, and but it was a few months before I joined them, summer of 22, and they had purchased Paper Cuts, and that was the eye opener to me, where I said, these guys are serious, because
it was those two things for me. It was like they purchased Paper Cuts. they hired Mike Marts. Okay, I need to start paying more attention here.
What's
Yeah,
going on?
Yeah, they mean business, or they meant business. And the other thing too is I had run into Mark Irwin just like a month or two before that at San Diego Comic-Con, and Mark is someone I've known for 25 years. We worked as editor inker for a long time on Marvel and DC books, and then I knew him when he was at Insight, and it was kind of what you were saying before, Bob. Like, I knew Mark was a comic book mind. He was someone who knew the business and spoke the language and could make great decisions for a company. So seeing that he was there when I was at San Diego, and then seeing them purchase Paper Cuts just a few weeks later, was the eye opener to me, and said to me, this is a company that is on the rise, that they're serious, they're going to be here for a long time. And their general mission statement of being able to create comics for everyone, and being serious about that, was another big thing to me. Because I mean, I worked at the superhero companies, I did creator owned, but I can never really say like any of that stuff was good for my younger daughter,
right?
And now I work at a company where there's two different imprints where she could pick stuff from. There's Paper Cuts, and she could read Maverick too for the young adult audience.
That's awesome.
Well, what's interesting is that Paper Cuts was really onto something from pretty much from day one, because they've been in the YA business, forever. And now we see the bigger publishers getting involved in the YA stuff. And evidently some of that stuff is selling very nicely. Some of it is quite good. I can't say I've read it all, but I've read enough to know that some of it really works. And I was thinking, when I was at DC in the 70s, I was beating my head against the wall, trying to get them to appeal to also a younger audience without losing the rapidly aging audience, and to women. Because why wouldn't you want to double your circulation? I mean, it's just that simple,
Right.
So incorporating that YA energy, if you will, great. Smart move. Oh. Aha!
I'm very excited about this. We are very excited about these things.
I have to compliment you on your balls.
I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I have to say, these three in particular make us really proud. We weren't quite sure that 2024 was going to be. We figured there'd be maybe one big thing going in, but now at this point we have several big things going in to 2024. The license business is one that we're very careful about. There are certain companies out there who their core business is licensing, and that's wonderful for them. They do a good job and everything.
Sure.
I don't think we want to be quite that. I think we're more interested in doing licenses that we would enjoy as readers, and be very careful in how we pick them and which ones we do. These three were really no-brainers, and they all initiated at different times in terms of the acquisition process, but to have them all kind of come out in this year, we're just extremely lucky. And going into convention season, we're really looking forward to it. And the retailer specialty covers that stores will do with publishers for big #1 issues like this sometimes are a really strong indicator of how a a book's going to be received and how well it does. And we just have so many retailers right now who are just dying to be involved with these books, and we feel
It at least will tell
strong
you.
industry.
It'll tell you what the people who are selling the books think it's going to do. Right? It gives you that perspective.
Right. That's a critical perspective. The problem with doing characters like these today is that not only do you have this whole legacy going back close to 100 years with Tracy and Flash, and you have to pay attention to that legacy. You know, you don't want to give people something completely different. They're expecting something to do with Flash Gordon if the book says Flash Gordon. On the other hand, at the same time, you have to tell the reader and the store owners, no, it's the 21st century. This is all new. It's the same, but it's better, and it's new, and it's contemporary, and you love the characters and the stories because you're familiar with that, but it's all exciting and new. Yeah, good luck with that. That's really hard, but that's the way you have to produce it. That's what you've got to create. You know, you're not doing Chet Gould's Dick Tracy from 1931. You know, that's not going to happen. And if it did, you couldn't sell
it.
Right.
This comes out tomorrow, and I read it a month or so ago. We had. I don't think Alex. I think we didn't. I think we didn't. We hadn't had it when we had Alex on, but we knew about it at the time, and it is surprise. It's really good, but it's surprisingly good in a way that it holds very similar to what I was talking about earlier. I think when you were in agreement when we were talking about X-Men 97, in that it feels like I like Dick Tracy, and therefore this feels like the people who made this like Dick Tracy too, and they're honoring it, but they're also evolving it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what I was saying about the way X-Men 97 is playing for me.
Oh, I see that point. You started off on the right foot. Alex is the perfect writer for a project like this, to approach a project like this, I think. So that, I don't know if that was your first casting decision, but it was.
This was right. It was a unique one because Alex and Michael actually attached themselves to the Dick Tracy license prior to it going to any publisher.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So they were super fans of Dick Tracy and sought out a way to do this. And so they had been talking to Tribune, I'm not sure how long. But when we were presented with the opportunity, we're like, it's triple threat. You have Alex, you have Michael, and you've got Dick Tracy. Right. So and like you said, Mike, like Alex, with his writing background and with crime novels, just the person who was born to do this. Right. You pair him with Michael, and it becomes even stronger. And then we cast out for artists, and Geraldo is available. Geraldo is just tearing it up in different areas across the industry, and we're lucky we got to have him come over and play with us. You see how he's just the perfect artistic fit for this book. He brings he's respecting the stuff of old from Chester Gould, but he's bringing a modern, I almost want to say like brutality to it. Just a real fierce attitude to the pages.
It's interesting because it feels, and I hope this works for me. So I don't know, but it feels similar to Daniel Craig's Bond, right?
Yeah,
it's that. Hey, this is that character, but it's a little tougher, a little there is that brutality similar to like, and it's one of the ways that Philip Johnson kind of talks to me about how he views why Daniel Craig is his favorite Bond, and I get that, and I kind of feel like when you were mentioning that and kind of how this book, at least the first issue, unfolds, there's that shady, shabby, edged ness to it that again fits Alex perfectly, and Michael's I'm a huge fan of his as well. And the art is just really, really holds up because it's got enough angles that it feels sharp and angly, but it's rounded in certain ways.
Tracy is that book, the Tracy book that you're doing, is a have your cake and eat it too moment, because you are both faithful to Dick Tracy. It is Dick Tracy, and you're faithful to the clock. It is the 21st century. They did that with Doctor Who, mostly brilliantly. They've done that repeatedly with Star Trek, with mixed success, but primarily good success. And of course, the Daniel Craig Bond, which was essentially a relaunch for the modern era. What gets me about that book, about that first issue, is you got a Coles Phillips cover. Now, this is okay for those of you out there who may not be aware. This guy was such a great cover artist, not comics, but magazines back in the 20s and 30s, that they put his work on a postage stamp a couple of years ago. Famous American illustrators. And that whole black knockout, we think of Tracy as, the movie made us think about yellow, even though the strip was mostly in black and white 6 out of 7 days. Here, you've got a tougher Tracy with an attitude. You can see the attitude. You see it in his face. You see it in how he's wearing his hat. You see it in how he's holding his arms. And he's even sort of teasing the wrist rate. You've got everything there in a contemporary fashion, in a way that people will not say, oh, this is a nostalgia thing. Because it isn't.
No, that's what's great about it. It's it's easily accessible to people who aren't super fans, and that's what makes it good.
Yeah, it's funny, talking about the art. One of the concerns I had going in was, all right, well, we're trying to do a modern comic, but stay true to the spirit of the original. How do you make a guy that walks around in a yellow jacket and hat work? But somehow, Geraldo and our colorist Mark Englert, they make it work. It just, he's walking around in a yellow trench coat, and it works. You don't even notice it.
Gould actually used that to his advantage in his later years. He made a big deal about how Tracy's hat, being yellow like that, served as a target. And Tracy had a collection of all of these yellow hats with bullet holes. That was hilarious. But, he's acknowledging the point. Yeah, it's yellow, and you're going to stand out, and you're going to be a target. It's cool. Now it's a plot point.
Yep. We're going to talk about some other things. This is is coming next month or the month after. What's up with this? I'm intrigued by this book.
Yeah, this is it's coming out in May. I think the middle of May, maybe 15th or so. So this is what we call one of our homegrown books at Cave.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so a bunch of what we do now is creator owned, of course, but the company had its origins in doing homegrown comics. So our CEO and chief creative officer, Mark London, is also a comics writer. And, he started the company by writing things like Battle Cats. And a lot of times what he would do is he would come up with a springboard of an idea for some project, 2, 3, 4-page treatment, and then cast for a writer out there, whether it's Cullen Bunn or Anthony Cleveland or whoever. But we would develop the ideas in-house at Mad Cave and then farm them out to an industry writer to develop and to build into something. This project sanction was done pretty much the same way. In fact, it was Mr. Mark Irwin, who came up with the initial idea. It's something that he had cooking in his head for a few years and always wanted the opportunity to tell the story. And sometime last year when we were talking about, hey, we need a few more titles on the schedule, that sort of thing, Mark was like, I offer up my idea. And, from there, we got Ray Faulkson, who I'd worked with plenty of times at DC and at Aftershock, bringing Antonio Fuso on art. And now we've got this great book on our hands where, it's funny. It starts with this little 2 or 3 page treatment that Mark Irwin had. And now it's this, this exciting project coming out. And the icing on the cake, of course, is the Dan Panosian covers, which
can't go wrong with that.
Mouth watering. You cannot go wrong with a Dan cover.
Right. I'm excited for that one. I got an email yesterday about this one from Amit. What's this is July though. I know this is July.
Yeah, this is
what's
July.
The story behind this one?
So this is from Amit Tischler, and he had developed a book for us at the end of last year called Eden Frost, which
we had him on the show. And
great!
We'll probably have him on again for this.
Oh, good. Amit is a storyteller by nature, but he hadn't been involved in comics all that much. So Eden Frost was a bit of an experiment for him, a bit of an experiment for us. It was executed so well. We were really proud of it at Mad Cave. It found an audience, and at the same time, he was developing a second project. This one with a co-writer, Elliot Spurl, and we had artist Rui Silveira come on, who is someone that both myself and our creator-owned editor James Emmett, we both wanted to work with Rui in the past, and so it was nice to bring him on board. This is it's a nice mix of everything. It's got elements of horror. It's got elements of sci-fi. There are times it feels post-apocalyptic. Sometimes it feels like a zombie story. Not zombies, but it feels like one. And at the center of it, is a very strong heroine who is seems to be the only person in the room with a solid head on her shoulders, and she's trying to keep all the shit together and to kind of keep havoc from breaking out. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a lot of right. Yes, yeah, a lot of crazy stuff happens to her family. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to tell you that the reason we had Amit on was because of the panel in New York last year when I was there, and he was talking about it, I'm like, I reached out to him like, hey, let's get you on the show and talk about it, and that was really that it's interesting because that what you did there, we at a panel in New York where you're talking about all the other things that made a difference, and I just want to share that, like, what you said was important. I recognized that, and we made an effort to kind of tell that story to other people too. So,
oh, that's great. That's great, because Amit's a name that we want the rest of the industry and the readership to know. We feel he has what it takes. And you've talked to him, you've met him. He's got an infectious personality, and he just loves talking story. So we hope this finds the same audience that Eden Frost did.
Now, you do realize that Mike has experience with this, right? He edited the Dan Jurgens run.
And not a very good one, although Dan was a great guy on this.
Dan is wonderful.
Dan's one of the greatest people I know.
How has this been for you guys up until this point?
This has been phenomenal. I mean, it's another kind of dream project realized that we feel lucky to be able to work on this character and his amazing supporting cast. One of the nice things about working on these big franchises is that you're never going to have a shortage of people in the industry who are interested in the character,
Sure.
right? Jeremy Adams is, I mean, he's really risen up through the ranks at DC over the last few years on Flash and on Green Lantern. And he was someone that was introduced to me, like, I want to say like 15 years ago or more. And we always kind of crossed paths, but never quite had the opportunity to work together. And then at some point we had him recommended to us, and I was like, I wonder if Jeremy likes Flash Gordon, because the stories he's telling with Green Lantern and Flash, they're superhero stories with positivity. There's just kind of like an uplifting feel and mood to his stories. And that was something that we wanted to capture for Flash Gordon. And sure enough, we called Jeremy. He turned out to be a huge fan. And then he sent us a wish list of artists, people that he'd worked with, mostly at DC. And Will was at the top of the list. Will Conrad.
You worked with Will before.
Yeah. I was trying to think about that. Will, I know we worked on stuff together a lot at DC because he was involved in the New 52 relaunch and everything. But we may have only done like maybe one issue together or some covers or something like that. But we certainly knew each other really well. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So we're lucky to bring him, and then industry veteran Lee Lowridge on colors.
Yeah,
it's it's just a fantastic project all around.
And Taylor is one of our favorites, and I want to come back and just mention that Jim Campbell's letters in Tracy are amazing.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like with both books, we picked the right letter. I mean, Jim is perfectly suited to the dark noir aspect of Dick Tracy, and then Taylor totally gets just the fun action adventure aspect of Flash Gordon. Yeah.
Do you feel any sense of, I don't want to say competition, and I don't want to say interference, I just don't know what I do want to say, with the relaunch of the newspaper strip? Which is actually, newspaper strips don't go in newspapers anymore. There are none. Except that Flash Gordon wound up in the Washington Post.
Yeah, not competition. I think that actually it's a good time for both things to be out there. In a way, we can build on one another, and maybe there's fans of strips who aren't aware there's comics going on, or vice versa. So I think it's a good thing that both are kind of happening in the same area at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. I mean, it's a good attitude to have, but it also makes sense. For no reason whatsoever, I want to point out that my all-time favorite movie villain is Charles Middleton, who played Ming in the three serials in the 1930s. I wanted to put that out there.
What's the plan for this? I know we're going to talk about Gatchaman in a minute, but like, what's the plan? This is the main issue. It's coming out in July. There's a free comic book day version, but there's other stuff coming, like that you guys are doing. What's going on with that?
Yeah, there is. We do kick things off with a free comic book day number 0, which is a prequel of sorts. You don't have to read it to enjoy the rest of the series, but you might enjoy it more if you do. This is an ongoing series, so we're committed to this for several years. So this will be the creative team for a while. The main spine of the overall Flash story happens here in the main series, but we will get to tell other stories in a Flash Gordon quarterly eventually, where we might have rotating cast of not only characters but creators too. Maybe some guys and girls who can't commit to a long ongoing series but can do, a single issue. So,
And there's also all these people out there who have a Flash Gordon story in them. Maybe only one, but they have that in them.
They do, and we have received plenty of pitches, a bunch of which we're going to develop and make into stories for this Flash Gordon Quarterly. But in addition to that, we plan to have other Flash related releases. We are reprinting all of the old strips, from the very beginning, in big hardcover deluxe fancy editions. I think we're going to be putting out maybe 2 per year of those big volumes. And then we also are going to be going into other imprints of ours to tell Flash stories. Just today, we announced Flash Gordon Adventures, which is a really fun middle grade book by Art and Franco, who everybody knows, and that's just it's extremely fun. There's one or two other projects which
there's a Franco question right here. I have hanging on my wall. There's a Franco question.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, they're both guys are doing great work on that.
Yep.
I love their work. I'm probably going to go crash their Free Comic Book Day.
That's going to be it. Listen, anybody in the tri-state area, I don't mean to take on other places, but the Oh Yeah Comics in Harrison Free Comic Book Day is going to be an event. Like,
yes, yes, it is. I like the store, although I haven't been there in a while. But they named the town after you, Bob.
I know. That's why it's important. But you have to give Mark a hug too, so that's important.
Okay.
Mark.
Wait, I'm trying to get Gotchamon. There we go. Let's talk about this. I saw today there's been announcements for the 2 things that I may have already heard about a while ago. In the 2 miniseries that are going to be attached to this got announced either today or yesterday or something like that. But this is again the main series for Gotchamon. I am very excited about this.
Why? You said that a few times on the show.
I have. I thought
the background would be interesting.
There's this. There's this. I'll tell you here's my Gotchamon story. First time I interviewed Chris Sotomayor, I asked him a question. I said, what is the cartoon that you had to get home to watch? And without dropping a beat, he said, Battle of the Planets. And I said, that's right. There was something about, and we just lost Mike. Well,
God, we lose more good people that way.
I know. He'll be back. I'm sure something happened. I'll tell my story to you so that I know I've said this. Battle of the Planets, which is my introduction to it, which was a Americanized version of Gotchamon. Gotchamon was originally an anime that was developed in 1972, but in the mid 80s, it was transferred to America. Alex Toth did some inside outsides for it. And all right, welcome back.
That was embarrassing.
Don't worry about it. I'm just telling you, like, the thing about Battle of the Planets that got me was they were so cool. Like, they were heroes. Like, I was a kid who loved New Teen Titans. I was a kid who loved Batman and the Outsiders and X-Men, and there were these heroes, and they were so cool. And to be honest with you, being in the industry and knowing people, like, I am as excited I am to get this book. I am more excited that Chris Batista gets to draw it.
Yes.
Because he gets it so well. It is these characters are heroes. They're out saving the world only because that's what they have to do. There's no that is the call that they have. But let me tell you, when Mark or Ken sits down on the couch and puts his feet up and with those bell bottoms on and the t-shirt, man, I wanted to be that kid so bad.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, I don't know how old I was, maybe 8 or 9, and I asked my mother if I could have my name changed to Jason, because I thought Jason was just so cool. Like, this guy was just, he was the shit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do have a
It's
Jason.
another one of those.
I have the Jason version as well.
Oh, that's sweet. I can see it right there. Yeah, with Chris Batista, it's a funny story. It must have been like maybe 99, 2000, and I was editing a project at Marvel called Space Knights, which was we wanted to do a ROM book, but Marvel couldn't do ROM anymore because they didn't have the license to ROM. But they did own all of the secondary characters that were created in the ROM book.
Mm-hmm.
So we did this Space Knights book. I think it was Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning that were writing it, and Chris Batista was the artist. And this was the first time I got to know Chris, and
Yep,
he was my he was my door into anime. I didn't know much about anime at the time, but
he's everybody's door into anime.
Right. I know. And so he introduced me to so many different things. And
well, that's true.
When he would come into the Marvel office with new pages, we'd look at his new Space Knights pages, and then like towards the end of his portfolio, I would see drawing of the Gotcha Man, Battle of the Planets characters. And I was like, "Oh, you're a fan of this too?" He's like, "Oh, I'm the biggest fan." And that stuck with me. Like I remembered that for 25 years.
Sure.
And then last year when we were thinking of, who are we going to cast as the artist for Gotcha Man, I was like, it has to be Chris. It has to be Chris.
Right.
So it was a no-brainer. And with the writing, I employed something that I did back at DC on Batman Forever, where I used kind of like a writer's room approach. Because we knew we were going to have more than just a regular series. We were going to have one-shots. We're going to have limited series.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be a big world. And we thought it's probably too big for one writer. So we developed this writer's room of Colin Bunn and Steve Orlando and Tommy Lee Edwards, right, all of whom are just, as big fan of Gotcha Man as Chris Batista is.
Yeah. I left that panel this year in New York with Chris, and we talked for like 25 minutes. Like, he started showing me stuff, and I just couldn't stop talking about it. He's like, "Oh, by the way, here's this website. We can watch everything you want on anime." and it was great because one of the conversations I had with him was because he didn't know Cullen, and I'm not sure that they've actually even met today.
I don't think so.
But I know Cullen, and I'm like, no, he's perfect. He's going to be the right guy. And and then I saw Cullen last month, and we were talking about it again. Just how much they're the right people to be doing this book. I've talked to Steve and Tommy Lee as well about the things that they're doing, and Tommy Lee's is Ken Battle something battle which
Ken Deathmatch,
and then and Steve is doing Galactor miniseries.
Yep.
Which, like I said,
those
they
are
are
just
announced.
Things that we have announced already. Right.
They are announced.
Right. We have others coming down.
Yes.
The road.
With respect
which are a
to
lot of fun.
When is it coming
out? June or July.
There will be a free comic book day for this as well.
Yep.
There's a free comic book day, Gotchamon. Yes.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah. Just like
they're
with Flash Gordon, it's
right.
basically a 0 issue, which acts as a primer, as a prelude, and then the regular issue does start in June. Both the #1 issue and the Ken one shot start in
Yeah,
June,
and
then
the
Flash Gordon starts in July.
right, and
Great.
the Galactor mini starts in July as well.
That is correct. Yeah. So we have a lot coming up.
What else? What your experience at Mad Cave? It's been 2 years now, just about. Rewarding, is that fair?
Most definitely. It's, yeah, I was talking before about how you wake up in the morning, you're happy to be doing what you're doing, the job you're doing. But to be able to come to this place of work every day, even though I do it virtually, um, it is extremely rewarding. This industry is tough. We all know
Mhm.
that. And it is hard to sell books, it's hard to penetrate the market, but we have an attitude that starts from up top with Mark London, that no challenge is too big, to always have a positive attitude, to learn from mistakes, to keep going even when we get beat down and fall down, just to get back up and keep trying harder. And everyone in the company has absorbed that attitude of his, and we work together as a team. It's a great place to work, and I have such a skilled and wonderful set of editors working for me, in on all the different imprints and all the different areas. It's just a very good place to work.
More important to me, you have a sense of excitement. Publishers don't rarely do that. There's a couple. Used to be, oh yeah, I'm a DC fan. I'm a Marvel fan. That's it. You told somebody you were a Harvey fan, and they'd look at you like you're an idiot. But there's excitement about what you guys are doing, and you're sitting here talking about these new projects, and I knew about them, and I've read a couple of them, and I'm excited. Now, I'm a fanboy. I've been a fanboy since I've learned how to read, and I was very precocious at that. So, doing it forever, and at my old age, you've managed to make me go, "Hey, cool!" And I love that.
Good. Mission accomplished then.
Thank you.
That's the goal. That's the goal, to get people excited and to reach people that we don't think we would have previously reached.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Is there more coming from you? Like, is there something that obviously that you can't, if it's not announced, you can't tell it here, but
sure you can.
Well,
we won't tell you.
We would love for you
right.
too, but people rarely take us up on that. But is there more that you're holding back on, that you know that we're gonna that the public's gonna get excited for?
I'll put it to you this way: like the excitement I got at Mad Cave acquiring Paper Cuts, or Bob, when you said you took notice when they hired me. There are a few more like that coming up in the next year or so, maybe sooner.
Good.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Like big, exciting things that people will talk about.
I mean, it's one of the things you kind of hit on earlier, where you're talking about Jeremy Adams, and the type of writing that he does, where it's optimistic. There's something about the work that you guys are doing that has that undertone of optimism, of even if the topic, if you have Cullen on something, it's going to be dark and let's not sugarcoat it. The Devil Who Wears My Face is not happy, but but it's really good, and good work gets people excited, even though it's the the subject isn't exciting, right? So that's
Mhm.
that's one of the things that I'm talking about. Like I saw a picture of you and David recently. I was scrolling through, and I love the fact that you brought him over there. I love the fact that you guys did that book there. There's so many. I get excited about the things that you guys are doing at Mad Cave. Really glad Christina's there, to be honest with you. I think she's fantastic. I think she's really fantastic. And I'm, again, we're excited. We're glad to hear it. It's one of those things. Mike will again throw at me, "You're friends at Mad Cave," because I'm so excited about it so often.
That's true.
That's good to hear.
That's true. Creativity is like a shark. If it doesn't continue to go forward, it'll go away. It'll die. And I admire, respect, and envy your position to keep that plate spinning at the top of that stick. As you said, it's not easy, and you know better. So it's your fault that you're here, and I thank you for that.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
And thanks for doing this, Mike. We really appreciate you coming on and talking about this stuff, talking about your history, talking about comics. We will be looking forward to it again. Hopefully there'll be some great stuff we can come on. You talk about whatever you want. We enjoy it.
Have me back anytime. I'd be extremely excited to do it.
All right. Well, thank you. I personally appreciate your being here, and I know Bob does, and I'm sure all the folks out there in Etherland do. This was an exciting 2 hours. We're talking comics in the best sense of the word.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and to get to talk about Black Wolf again.
Right. Well, I'm going to talk about it again this weekend because, like I said, we're going to Ithacon. Bill Anderson's going to be there. And I'm going to say, you know what? That Black Wolf. I talked to your colorist.
That's great. Only on one issue.
Right.
I'm not even sure how many
and
pages.
Jack Morelli lettered it.
Oh, Jack, the best. Yes.
Yep.
And Glenn Herdling wrote it. Yep. All-star team.
All right. Thanks for being here, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Going to Ithaca.
We're on to Ithacon. Yeah, we're gonna. It's across the Mediterranean in the Aegean, right?
Somewhere around there. I think. I think that the Pompeii stuff has cooled down enough so that we can do a convention.
Just follow Odysseus, right?
That's right. Wow. It's great. I'm looking forward to seeing you and Sherry and all of our friends out there.
Right.
That's wonderful.
We will be at Ithacon this weekend. Stay tuned to our socials because we'll probably be posting some pictures and maybe some videos. We'll be back next week. Stay tuned, and we will update you on our guests, which we still have to confirm, but we will be here and we'll have plenty of stuff to talk about.
All right. Thanks, folks. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.